For those that haven't been coming regularly since January to your meetings, and twice a month we meet, roughly every other Monday. And we started with in 1776, and we're into the 1850s now, and there's method to my madness. We're going to get to June, and then we're going to arrive at the onset of the Second American Revolution, which was basically among the issues that were before the nation at that point were, are we going to go further than the original framers of the both of the Declaration and the Constitution were able or willing to go in terms of bringing the promise of that famous phrase, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness to everyone. And there are some answers to that, and maybe they're not sufficient. And whether we go further into the year, I got another revolution to tell you about, but let's tonight be very brief. How could I have missed this? But I have a little something for you. It's already in the background, and we put this in the background so that those of you who want to come here sort of primed for what is on the council's agenda, you can see what I'm going to talk about. And tonight we're in the 1840s, heading into the 1850s, and heading toward the Great Civil War. But it was on this date in American history, 283 years ago, and I think this is apropos, Thomas Jefferson was born. And it's interesting that just before he died, and we talked about this 4 months ago, he and John Adams, two of the framers, died on the same day, exactly 50 years after the adoption of the Declaration of Independence. But within about a week of that, in his last recorded rest, he was mulling or musing over what it was that people would remember about the Revolution. And he had reached the conclusion that people would never really know what was at stake, as much as they'd like to, and not meaning to diminish the astuteness of his then contemporaries. But he said the living through it, the chances taken, the risks endured, and the losses that were braved are just almost beyond our ability to describe. And so has been my challenge over the last 4 months. It's hard to bring life, as I'm trying to do tonight, to the Compromise of 1850. How many live and die for that? But it was a step along the trail to coming to terms in a very violent way through our Civil War at mid-19th century, toward grappling with the incomplete portions of the Revolution of 1776 to 1783. So while we're detached from this history and we're trying through individual stories to get just a little flavor for what was at stake and whether we would do something like that or not, it's just very hard to grasp. But I am going to give you a couple things which I think we can grasp, maybe a little more than some other things. Tonight, I just wanted to talk very briefly about some small voices with big impacts. And everyone in this room can have a big impact at different points in their life. It takes, in some cases, study. Sometimes it takes courage. Sometimes it just takes a lot of dedicated and enduring effort towards something. One of those people we have talked about before, we talked about John Quincy Adams. Now, he was born to a prosperous family, but he kind of paid his dues. We talked about what he did. This is John Quincy, his father, John, kind of hard to grow up in that family. But when he was 8 years old, he took him on a sailing ship to England in the middle of the American Revolution to help him, to be with him as he was trying to gain support from the French and the Dutch in behalf of our war for independence. And he didn't have enough of that, and about 5 years later, he went on his own as a young teen to Russia as our plenipotentiary representative to that country to talk about who we were, what we were, and why they might be able to ally with us in some fashion. He later became a senator, Secretary of State, President of the United States, and in 1831 he decided he had not had enough, so he ran for Congress, and he died in Congress in 1848, which is where we pick up today. A couple other things happened around the same time. While John Quincy was talking in the rather peaceful environs, still rather peaceful, of the U.S. Congress, there were others who were taking great personal risk. Frederick Douglass was not alone in this, but he is one of the more articulate of persons who had been enslaved. On the 10th anniversary of his escape from slavery, he wrote a letter in his weekly newspaper, the North Star, in which it was symbolic, of course, he didn't have his former master in front of him, but he lectured him about the natural right to self-ownership. And he said, "I am myself, you are yourself, we are two distinct persons, equal persons. I am not by nature bound to you, or you to me, but I wear stripes on my back inflicted by your direction." A powerful statement. While he was making those statements in the media, though another person who was born a Maryland slave, Harriet Tubman, was doing something just, it's hard to imagine the courage and the risks that she took. She escaped to freedom in 1849, and then she returned to the South to help other slaves escape. 19 times to the deep South, not like over the river and into the woods. And by the late 1850s, she had brought out over 300 slaves, including her parents and family. And while she was doing that, better known at the time, a writer was moving in the direction of writing a story about what, from her status, what she considered to be the cruelties of slavery, and that was Harriet Beecher Stowe. She married a widower whose last name was Stowe. She moved to Maine from Ohio. Her husband accepted a post as a teacher at Bowdoin College. Interestingly, at the same time that her husband was teaching there, there was a fellow by the name of Joshua Lawrence Chamberlain, the hero of Little Round Top, who was a student there studying religion. But she wrote Uncle Tom's Cabin, and as we look at it from our vantage point today, we think, oh, this is interesting, it's moving. It's not as literary as things that we might pick up today, but it had an impactful effect on opinion, at least in the North. Well, actually in the South, too. In the North, her book at that point sold more copies than any other book. There were people who were naming their babies Eva, one of the characters in her book. In the South, obviously, the book was ridiculed as being out of touch, slanderous, and incendiary. There was something called the Underground Railroad. We don't have a lot of great sources on that because people who were conductors helping people escape slavery to come north would have been hanged if they had been caught. So not a lot of people were leaving their signatures on things. There is, and some of you know our local history. If you've been to the DeKalb County History Center, you'll be able to see what our role was, this county. But there were people who were escaping and trying to dodge bounty hunters, slave catchers as they were known at the time. Because at that point, not only were slaves returned to bondage if they were caught, but persons who harbored them were summarily punished, oftentimes hanged themselves. And while all this is going on, America was growing and it was moving west. And that provided opportunities for people who wanted free soil and were against slavery, but not necessarily in favor of equal rights. It was also opportunities for people who owned slaves to expand to the west, where more opportunities were available to them and their agricultural businesses, again, all because of the slave labor they had. And the contest over the West created what ultimately became as the preconditions for the Civil War that we know from the middle of the 19th century. The Compromise of 1850 is important at this vantage point for just a couple reasons. Like a lot of things we're even seeing today in a divided Congress, it didn't last as a compromise. It's tried to set forward some terms that would prevent a collision over the issue of slavery. It was not successful in that way. And in the next two meetings, we're going to see why.